of Underrated and Overlooked Podcast. Hope everybody's having a great start to the week. A lot to discuss today. Obviously, it's Super Bowl week, so it's going to be a fun week. Obviously, we'll break down that matchup a little bit. Also, going to be bringing on a guest, Chiefs super fan Casey Sager, Craig's sister. That'll be a lot of fun to talk about as well. She has a great, vast amount of Chiefs knowledge, and she's going to definitely clue us in and talk about the team. And then obviously, we'll get into some sports and things like that. So a lot to cover today. But how you feeling, Craig?
Feeling good. I thought it was a great way to start the week. Anyone that didn't watch that Wheeler Newton game last night, hopefully you'll get to see a rematch later. It was one of the best high school games I've seen. Really felt like a potential state championship matchup. And I'm just excited about the rest of the basketball season because of that game right there.
No, that was good. Actually, let's go ahead and get into that first. That can be our headline. Obviously, it's a show about football, and we'll obviously throw some things in there with basketball as well. But yeah, I'll start with that game. That game was great. I mean, the pace of the game. Collier, I think he's probably the best player in the country. I mean, just when he got a full head of steam on him, nobody could really slow him down or stop him. So I thought that made the difference, and he has great playmaking ability. He can score in the middle and in the mid range. He was shooting the three ball well deep NBA range last night. He was getting to the paint with will and at ease. And Newton really had no answers. So I thought he did good. I saw Castle try to take the challenge a couple times. Some of them he was effective on, but it's hard to stop a great player like that. But that's one of the things that stood out to me.
100%. He's pretty big too, isn't he? Like 6'4"?
Collier?
Yeah.
Yeah, 6'4", yeah.
Yes. He helped Wheeler stay in control in terms of pace the entire game. As you said, when he gets a full head of steam, it's unbelievable. And his passing was outstanding. And then his scoring ability, the way he finished at the rim, you talked about his outside shot. He was unguardable in my mind. And I just thought it was so impressive, the overall team effort that Wheeler showed. I mean, Newton had answers, but it was that supporting cast around Collier, and then he just never took the foot off the gas the entire game. Really had a phenomenal performance, and I mean, I can't wait to see him in the McDonald's All-American game. Can't wait to see him in the playoffs, and he's going to be a real problem because it's not just one guy that's going to be able to guard him. It's a kind of team effort, and you have to find a way to not only slow him down, but avoid that counter ability that Wheeler had. I mean, they were so fast getting down the floor, and he's just one of the best players I've seen for sure.
Yeah, you said it. And when you brought the supporting cast, I mean, Jelani Hamilton, obviously, I think he's a 4-star. He's going to a big Iowa State, I believe he's going to. He was really impressive as well because when they were bringing the traps to Collier, they got the ball up quick up the court, and then Hamilton was able to find the open man, or he was taking the shot and making the defense pay. So it was like you're almost in a bind. A lot of times you'll see a star player on the team. They'll key in on him early in the game, make it difficult for him, get him out of his rhythm. But Collier was never out of his rhythm. He had a great supporting cast, as you mentioned, and it was able to take the pressure off him when they did doubled and trapped him. And I've seen a couple times, he looked not fatigued, but a little, winded. And Johnny Hamilton could bring the ball up and then make a play for Ayrton Page. And that was one of my things, too, I said in obviously the game of the week post was Newton is very guard-oriented. They have a big, but it felt like Page would be a problem for them because they didn't have really a paint presence that could slow him down. And he made a big effect as well. I mean, he was one and I seen a play. He was blocking a shot, and then he raced all the way back to the other floor and then dunked it. So, I mean, having an athletic big like that can play both ends of the floor well and run. A lot of times you see bigs that can't run the floor. I mean, but to have somebody that can run the floor as well doesn't get much better than that. So I thought he was another key factor. Those three to me was really the standouts of kind of making Newton pay and the difference. And then for Newton, a good team, really good team. I just think, their outside shooting was not good in that game. It's like they couldn't buy a bucket beyond the three-point range. I think they hit maybe 1 or 2 threes all game long. I have to go look at the stats, but I mean, they couldn't buy a bucket. They were getting open shots. Stephon Castle was creating, but it was hard for them to convert the threes. I thought Ja'Kai Newton was a big factor in that game. I mean, obviously him in the block shot against Collier. When Castle was doubled, he was able to make plays inside that zone. He was able to create his own shot, which was big. He's an Indiana commit. I think he's going to be a big difference for them going down the stretch, just taking a little bit of pressure off of Castle, having somebody else that can score and be able to get their own shot in their own bucket. But the key thing will be, obviously, if they play Wheeler again, as Collier mentioned in the interview, they're a great team, but It's going to be, can they slow down, obviously, Collier? And then if they're able to do that, can they kind of isolate? Can they kind of slow down Page? I think is going to be key. If they ever, if they meet again in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think both stars played well.
Yeah.
What impressed me about Wheeler, though, you're talking about Page, you're talking about these other guys. They were just faster once Collier would deliver it in the post, getting the shot up. It's like Newton had some opportunities in the paint, but the defense would come. They'd throw it too hard off the backboard. Wheeler had great touch under the basket, and they didn't need that extra pass. That's why it was so impressive with the pace. And then anytime Newton did spark a run, I thought they did show that they have an ability to hit those mid-range shots. They did knock those down when they were open. They struggled from three, but it was the speed of Wheeler, the way they just whipped the ball down. If they have a one-on-one in the paint, he's getting it without even having to turn his back. I mean, that ball's going right back up there.
Good point.
And they had, outstanding touch. So it was that quickness under the basket that Wheeler showed. Once that ball gets delivered, they go straight up with it. Great presence. And that's what, in a potential rematch, I was saying Newton's almost going to have to know where the ball's going to be.
Yeah.
Because Wheeler they had that going for him. It's like the guys were moving around the court well. They were, they were running legitimate plays, even though it looked like they were just going down the court so fast. I mean, it was just an outstanding coach team and one of obviously the best high school basketball teams in the country.
For sure. And I think the big thing too for both of these teams is that they've played nationally ranked schedules. Like they've played some of the creme de la cremes in the conference they've played. So I'll go far as just both teams. So they played Columbus High School, who I think is number 5 at Max Preps rankings. They played Lake Highlands. They played Duncanville. They played Virginia Academy, Bishop Gorman. This is just several teams they've played. So, like I said, when it comes to, obviously they've had some losses, but when it comes to the playoffs, they're going to be well prepared because they played a national schedule. They've traveled on the road and have been able to play against some of the top tier talent that that they're going to face come playoff time. So they're going to already be prepared. So, I mean, I think it just be another notch under their belt. But I think 7A, just what it took away, big takeaway for me was 7A is going to be really good as far as just basketball goes. And the boys, not to say the other ones won't, obviously there will be, but I think 7A is going to be really entertaining to see who comes out because, as Craig mentioned, he thinks Wheeler is up there. I agree with him, but I think it's a couple teams that could, make some noise too. You got McKeitron, can't forget about them. Norcross, obviously. Grayson has some really good bigs that are young, but they're really good. That's another team to keep an eye on. And then Pebblebrook, you can't sleep on them either. So there's some teams that could be there. I just think it's going to be a great tournament. I think it's going to be a great tournament. Can't wait to see, who comes out on top.
Yeah, you talked about the national schedules they've played.
Yep.
Wheeler's still yet to lose in the state, so they're obviously the number 1 right now. They're still – I mean, it's going to be a great region tournament, I think, for both teams. But what specifically do you think of Newton and Page? Both those guys are also – they didn't get the invite to the All-American, but they were nominees. I mean, they're up there. And I thought they also showed that, I mean, they are exceptional talents, and they really played key roles last night.
No, for sure. I mean, yeah, like I said, Page, he was a threat on both sides of the floor. He ran the floor well. When he was in the game, he was putting pressure on the defensive interior. He was, penetrating the zone. He was in the middle, and they didn't have answers. He was crashing the boards when they missed. It felt like that, too. It felt like Newell could get 2 or 3 stops, but then he was crashing the boards and making a difference or kicking it out, and it was getting the jump shot and nailing it. So I thought that was key. I felt like Wheeler hit more shots. So, yeah, he's going to be going to SC, obviously, with Collier as well. So I thought he was just dominant, on the boards. And his paint presence made a difference in the game. And then for Newton, like I said, he just gave Castle another scoring threat. Not saying that MJ Westbrook, I think it's another player that plays for them. He's really good too, but it's just good to have that extra scoring threat because at his naturalness, he's kind of a playmaking guard. He can score obviously with the best of them, but he likes to get his teammates involved. And it was tough last night because a lot of them they weren't hitting a lot of their shots. Not saying that's going to happen again, but to be able to have Newton that hey, I can give him the ball, he can go give me a bucket no matter what. I mean, that's something nice to have. And he plays both ends of the floor well, and he's going to go attack, the best player on the other end. So I think, both of those made their, impact, and obviously they're going to be important going down the stretch for both teams.
Yeah, I mean, Collier, gosh, he was so good at scoring. Obviously, I'm impressed with his passing ability, too, in that game. I just watched that, and you think about the playoffs. It's like Collier, these games, he's not going to come off the floor. So stopping him is going to be a real problem. And I think Wheeler last night just showed they have a surrounding cast. Um, they never wasted a possession. There weren't guys just standing around. They're getting open. They're creating space. They're running great plays, keeping the defense just moving constantly while still playing an up tempo. I just think it's going to be really hard. The surrounding cast around Stephon Castle, that's going to have to be
Yeah.
addressed. He's a great scorer, but it's like when you come out play an elite player like Collier, he's got 10 points in the first quarter. You're already trailing. They've got to find a way to come out, get their other guys going, put some more pressure on the defense so Stephon Castle's not having to do it all, because it was up to him to try to get him back in that game. I still was impressed, though, by Newton. I think they're going to make a deep run. But, I mean, at this point, I mean, I've seen a lot of good Wheeler teams. I think they're mad. They got upset last year by Grovetown early in the playoffs. They knew they were coming up to 7A, and I think that was a big game right before the playoffs, and they came out and just obviously didn't disappoint, but also the way they closed out the game too was fantastic. The energy, they just kept piling on the points at the end and just never let Newton get back in it. So I just thought the focus was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the focus was important. It seemed like a team that was down 18, not up 18.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I mean, they did good with that, and like I said, we'll see down the stretch. Both teams got 2 regular season games left. Newton's going to play, I think, Parkview and then Grayson, and then it's the region tournament. So both teams are sitting at number 1 in the region. So we'll see how it all finishes out and plays out, but you could pretty much lock in probably Wheeler for the region 1 seed, and then probably the tournament. And then we'll see how it comes out with Newton. I think Grayson's a good team. They lost early this season. They'll be able to get the revenge in the other game. I think that's on the road in Newton. So we'll see how it all pans out. But I think just real quick, and we'll transition. I think Newton is going to be the difference, the player, Ja'Kai Newton, that's going to Indiana for the Rams to kind of make a difference and actually help out Castle going down the stretch. I think getting him back is huge. Only second game back. He really impressed, what I'm saying, in the second game back. Just, being a threat and obviously playing great defense as well.
For sure. And last thing I'll say about it, I think a lot of teams around the state were tuning into that game last night or taping it, watching it later. I think it sent a message. I think just the production of it all, just seeing the packed environment, they're going to have to contend with that team. And when you see Collier play like that, I think these other coaches, these other teams are going to know what they're up against. I think that's huge.
I agree. But yeah, that's our reaction to the big Wheeler versus Newton game. Definitely go check it out. Phenomenal game that was on ESPNU last night. We loved watching it. But I went this past weekend, Friday. Lovejoy played against Woodward Academy. Lovejoy got the victory 58-51. What really stood out to me was Brianna Preston. She's really good off the dribble. I thought, her point guard skills was great. She was beating any defender they put on there, Sarah Lewis, Cameron Herring, anybody they put on there, she was beating off the dribble with ease, getting to the cup and the bucket, and then also being able to facilitate and pass as well. So I thought she performed great in that game. She's going to be the difference in them, contending for another title this season. But she showed how great she is, knocking down shots, getting people open. And then Lanaya Foster, and that one had 21. Preston had 14. But they both really impressed me. He jumped out to a 16-2 lead early in the game, had all the momentum and advantage. It was tough. It was an uphill battle all game for Woodward Academy, but some things I like to see. Sarah Lewis had 21 points, 7 boards, and then 3 steals in that game. She was a difference maker. I think she should have had the ball a little bit more in her hands. Sometimes it kind of looked like it went away from that to other players, but I thought she was really impressive when the ball touched her hands, getting other people involved, knocking down shots, getting to the paint. And then the sophomore that really impressed me, as I mentioned just earlier, Cameron Herring. She only had 5 points, but she made a big impact on both sides of the floor. She was good, facilitating, passing the ball. She was very athletic, I thought. She was blocking shots on the other end. She was grabbing boards. She was getting steals. I think she needs a little bit more involvement on the offensive side of the ball along with Lewis. I think that'll help them out a lot. It seemed at some points that they struggled offensively getting it going, but towards the end of the game, it did good. They went on a 15-4 run, cut back into the game, made it really interesting towards the end. It was just a little bit too far behind, but they made it really intriguing with the turnovers they was forcing. And, Lewis and obviously Herring was behind that. So that was a great game.
Yeah, I just want to say, I mean, both teams, they had the 10-game win streak going in. Lovejoy beat Woodward earlier. That game was more high scoring. I saw that both teams were knocking down a lot more threes in that game. They struggled this time around. But Woodward, they've beaten Kel this year. They're one of the top teams. This was a 6A matchup. Kel's down in 5A. They won't have to face them. But this was definitely the biggest girls' game this past week.
Yep.
And I think we know Presley. She's a junior. She's one of the highest rated players in the state. But Lanaya Foster, in both these matchups against Woodward Academy, she's taken the bulk of the shots. She had 25 points in the first matchup, 21 this last time around. So I think she's played huge. And then I think you were talking about the maybe slow start Woodward got out to, but the fast start Lovejoy, 16-4 at the end of the first quarter. So that's huge. These fast starts are so important to get going, and it's hard to overcome that 16-4 hole that Woodward faced.
No, for sure, it was. I wanted to credit Wood for actually jumping back into the game, making it competitive. But yeah, it's definitely tough, and I see why Preston is one of the best players. They had no issues for her offensively. They tried traps and different things like that, zones, but she was just able to penetrate in the hole. And then when she was doubled or anything, she got Lanaya Foster, and she was able to nail it up there in the paint and in the post. And that was really the difference. But a great victory for Lovejoy as they continue to try to get that 1 seed, which I think they pretty much have locked up, because that was actually senior night as well, and that was the last basically I think game for the regular season before the region tournament. So we'll see how it plays. I think some tournaments will be kicking off this week.
And that's big. Woodward, if I'm not mistaken, won 5A last year. Now they're in 6A, and that's one of the things we talked about before the years. How stacked 6A is on the girls' side. You also have Maris; they're surging right now. Great defensive team. I think that's definitely the classification to watch, and we're going to see the big upsets in the 7A boys, and I think 6A girls, once that region tournament gets, is going to be incredible. We might even see Lovejoy Woodward square off again in probably a week and a half.
Yeah, we probably could see that for sure. But we'll leave the high school hoops there. We're going to go to some high school football news. Martavis Collins, tight end for Rome, decommits from Alabama. So his recruiting is back open. So he's a great tight end for them. Really good across the middle of the field. Runs great routes and things like that. So I think it'll be interesting to see where he goes next. Obviously, he still has a whole another year under his belt. But yeah, what do you think about him decommitting from Bama?
I think it's really interesting because it's that Auburn versus Alabama. Where is he going to go? We've seen this with some big time players in the past. Reuben Foster sticks out to me. Once you're in between the Auburn and Alabama, I think it's good for him. He's going to get to kind of be that Roman standard in whatever recruiting class he goes into, just with his exceptional frame. He's been playing since he's a freshman. He's really experienced, one of the best class of 2024 commits. So he has that leverage where if he ends up going to Alabama, if he ends up going to Auburn, he's going to be almost one of the centerpieces of that recruiting class. And he might even have the ability to convince other guys to go where he ends up landing. So when you have someone that's kind of defining the recruiting class, I think that's exciting. And then just kind of sitting in the middle of that Iron Bowl rivalry, that's also great. So he'll be able to choose wherever he wants. I think that's awesome. He's earned it, but he's just a true freak athlete that is just so physically gifted. He's basically starting at tight end as a freshman for Rome, and he's still just filling out his frame. I think he's at 250 now. So we'll see what he does. He'll have a big year for sure, and he's in that position where he'll get to hopefully choose between those two schools. Maybe another one will come in the mix, but I think it is going to be just between Alabama and Auburn at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll let you know any news, but he announced this a couple of days ago. So we'll see what happens with him and where he decides to go. But we'll also be covering them next season. Obviously, me and Craig cover the football for high school. So we'll keep you guys clued in to what happens with him. Other interesting news I thought I saw across the Twitter landscape was JoJo Stone actually being committed to LSU, but basically saying, his recruiting is still open. Despite being committed, any other schools, you can still come get me. So I thought that was intriguing. He's actually at Langston Hughes now, the former Grayson receiver. He used to play quarterback for them as well. So it'd be interesting to see how he plays his senior season there. Obviously, I think he's going to be more of a focal point at Langston Hughes now, especially with some of their weapons gone. Probably be more dependent, or Prentice Arnold will be more dependent on him. So I think it'd be intriguing to see what happens. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a ploy for teams. He's a 4-star to try to reach out to him and see if they can sway him away from LSU. I think that's still open because, he obviously said, even though despite him being committed, he's still open to what other teams have to say.
Yeah, and I mean, he's a guy that transferred mid-season last year
Yep.
from Grayson to Hughes. That was surprising to both of us. I think you're exactly right, though. He's going to play a massive role this next season with Prentice Nolan, uh, who I think he just got recently offered from
Yep.
Alabama,
He did.
and Auburn has been in the mix as well. JoJo Stone, they offered him back in November. I think he's even taken 2 visits at this point, and so that's a school that's kind of getting involved, trying to possibly steal him from LSU. But what's going on in the class of 2024 right now? Yes, this is exciting. Fans of these programs, they don't like seeing guys decommit, but I think it's just part of it. And when you have these big name guys, they have the ability to get other players from around the state, guys that they played youth ball with, other big time recruits that they play on 7-on-7 tournaments with. Who knows? He might be out with Prentice Nolan this season, his primary guy, and then they end up going off together. So I think he's a guy that transferred last year at the high school level. I think he's just waiting to see, but obviously has the opportunity to go wherever he wants, as long as he just keeps at it. And I just want to see what he does with a full year at Hughes. I think he's in store for a big year.
I agree. I mean, that's a great point by you. Yeah, I agree. I'm curious to see how that offense is going to look next year with graduating a lot of seniors, some core players that were really good for them last year. How will he look? Like you said, being kind of the focal point of that offense. How would that Hughes offense look another year with Prentice Nolan after his
Yeah.
phenomenal junior season? That's going to be really intriguing.
And
Um,
nothing against Grayson last year, but I mean, the offensive firepower of Hughes last season, they broke the all time state record for most points in a season. So I think he's going into a high powered offense with obviously one of the best quarterbacks in the country.
yeah, great point by you. We're gonna leave it there. We're gonna transition now to some college news. Something I've seen across the landscape. Dabo Sweeney suggests moving up National Signing Day to August 1st to kind of help protect players in recruiting. So yeah, that's a headline. I wanted to see what kind of Craig thought about it. Kind of his suggestion.
The most interesting part about that is when you look at the quote and what Dabo was saying about it, their class of 2023, I think all 26 of their guys were early signees. So they didn't even have any late signees. And he was saying that we were so confident with our early signing class that even if the early signing day was before this past football season even started, all the way in August 1st, he said we still would have had those same 26 guys. So that's an interesting point. I can't think of another college that signed their entire class early. And I mean, we were talking with Luke about these guys and how they were bought in. They knew exactly what they wanted. So I don't think he's trying to necessarily get rid of it. I think what he's saying is having the early signing day since 2017, it has been beneficial in many ways, just in terms of helping shape your recruiting class instead of just relying on that one date. That was definitely more chaotic. Um, there's still obvious movement and all that stuff, but right now we're seeing like 70 to 80% of the class gets filled early at these big Power Five schools. And so what he's saying is, even if we moved it up, he doesn't feel like it would really impact them and the way they go about it. And I just thought it was interesting that every single one of their signings was in the early period.
Yeah, I thought my takeaway from it was I thought it was he was saying like with how everything's going out the transfer portal and how tough it is for kids, those scholarships get locked up quick. So I think being able for them to go ahead and being able to go ahead and sign early and go ahead and get out the way, not having to wait or anything like that prior to their senior season, I think is beneficial. And I agree with them. I think it helps protect players in recruiting. And then let's say like you signed to Clemson already August. So let's say they have a coaching change, right? So then let's say you want to leave, it doesn't affect, you know what I'm saying, your scholarship if you want to go somewhere else. So I think that was kind of his point behind it and kind of his focus. So I think that's important too, to think about as well, because you have a bunch of coaching changes and a guy that really recruited you and brought you in, you know, anything can really happen. It's not kind of cut and dry always, because it could be one bad season and then the coach that recruited you, once you go there, is no longer there. You know, what if you want to go to the school he's at, the new school he's at then? You know what I'm saying? So that's something to think about as well. But yeah, I think it'll take the obviously pressure off. The kids can go ahead and sign the early signees. That would obviously be probably the creme de la creme. But just getting out the way before your senior season, already being signed, so then you don't have to worry about, oh, a scholarship going away, or oh, we like this guy better, and things like that. So I think all
Yeah,
that makes a difference.
I mean, it is a fair point. I think the only thing that I would disagree with what he said, which is not inaccurate. I mean, all of these guys were early signees, but if you did move it up to August 1st, the only guy I think that wouldn't be included in that was Peyton Straco. He comes
That's
in
true.
midway through senior year and gets that big offer. So
That's a good
that's one
point.
of the only later guys that would have missed out. But as long as there were still the two periods, they could, as you said, get these guys locked in before their senior season, especially if they're trying to enroll early. I think that makes sense.
Yep.
And then still have room for a couple other guys like the Peyton Stracos that they offer later on that could sign. But then would you potentially miss out on an opportunity to have them enroll early? So
Yeah.
we'll see. But I just thought it was interesting that they are really bought into getting their guys early. I think that's crucial.
No, I agree. I think it is too. You could just, you know, start development programs and, you know, getting them, you know, obviously if they're early enrollees, getting them different things, you know, weight training programs, you know, getting them playbook early, getting them working out, developing a cohesive plan for them coming into the school where, you know, they can, you know, be up to speed already before, you know, obviously spring practice, and then after that in the summer getting ready for the season. So I think all that
Yeah,
matters for
I
sure.
think it sends a message too. What he's essentially saying is like, if we offer you early as an underclassman, we're sticking to you.
Yep.
We're
Good
we're
point.
going to be loyal. So I think even the messaging of him saying this and then pointing out that all his guys are coming in early, he's trying to basically put the premium on these offers, saying we're going to stick with you. We're loyal.
That's a good point. That's a good point. All right, so we're gonna leave that there. One more topic for college landscape. Me and Craig both saw the big Kansas versus Texas game. Texas, I think before that game was going in, they were already pegged by Joe Lenardi, who's a bracketologist expert, um, as a one seed going into the college football, basketball tournament. So, you know, that's a big loss for them on the road against Kansas, another good team. They were number 9. Texas was number 5. Um, but my big standouts in that game, I mean, Jalen Wilson only being held their best player to 2 points. They had 5 players in double figures. Um, you know, that showed that, you know, if you try to key in on something, same thing we said, well, obviously with Wheeler in the high school level, keying on one player, but then you have other players that could beat you. I thought that was huge. You know, to me, Dejon Harris was big in that game, 17 points. The freshman, Grady Dick, when he got the ball, he was, you know, nailing threes. You know, he was beating guys off the dribble. All that, you know, was big for them, I thought, yesterday. And they're going to need that going into, obviously, into the tournament if they want to contend for a national championship. But I thought that was a welcoming sign for Bill Self, having those guys step up big. They jumped out to an early lead. The first couple of minutes were ugly for Texas. It couldn't really get a rhythm, but they did turn it around, got back into the game. But I just thought, you know, that was a difference. They were nailing shots. When it seemed like Texas got stops, Kansas was constantly on the boards, creating other shots, other opportunities. And then after a while, that just takes its toll. And, you know, we saw that with, you know, the rebounding, Gray Dick hitting the threes, or rebounding, putting it in with putbacks, putting extra points on the board. They did try to keep him in the game with some of the fouls late, obviously, with the 3-point shot fouls and things like that. But I thought overall it was a great game for Kansas. And Marcus Carr for Texas stood out to me, 29 points. He had a good game at the guard spot position. Timmy Allen also had 18 points and 4 boards. But the usual kind of off the bench player, I think he leads the national or the NCAA, obviously, in scoring off the bench, was Serge Jabari Rice. He had points, but he shot 5 for 13, so inefficient shooting night for him. But I thought overall, Kansas just controlled the game throughout.
Yeah, well, 12 points off a bench player. I mean, that's great. That's invaluable. think with Texas though, they were what were they ranked? 5, 4,
Five.
5.
Yeah.
So they were higher ranked. I just think just hearing about their recent games, I mean, they had to claw back against TCU, claw back against Kansas State. They have a slow start against Kansas
Yep.
in hostile territory. So those slow starts, that's gonna basically put you in a hole, even if the other team, their best player, is struggling with foul trouble, only having 2 points, usually averages 21 per game.
Yep.
You can't have those slow starts. They end up tying it up 43-43, but they never get a lead in the game. I think that would have been huge to just even go up by one, put the pressure on. But clearly a top 10 team. They shot the ball well, but yeah, the rebounds are huge. When the other team's shooting well, but you can win the rebounding when they do miss it, that's humongous. You can't give a team that's shooting well second chances. Kansas overall that played well at home, and yeah, it's a big win. I thought the quote afterwards from Kansas, they were saying that it felt like a must-win game for them because they want obviously to keep this thing going this season, get the momentum going in the tournament. They knew this was a big one and didn't want to disappoint, and they knew picking up the win would be huge. So I think they took the game as a big matchup and just another outstanding basketball game that I got to see last night.
No, for sure. And obviously, Bill Self stays undefeated on Big Monday. I think he's 36-0 now. So yeah, it's crazy. His record on Monday is ridiculous, but a great win for Kansas. It'll be some great region tournaments. As you guys all know, I love region tournament time. Obviously for NCAA, because it's like if you struggle, or conference tournament, if you struggle, throughout the season, you can have a team that's 12-12, 8-8, or something in the conference, right? A bubble team, but then they can go out on a run and then win the region tournament, and obviously, or the conference tournament, obviously, have a playoff berth. So those are always important. We'll see who comes out on the other end of it, but I think the Big 12 obviously will be one of the more interesting ones to watch.
I forgot what year Georgia did that. Gosh, it might have been 2007, maybe 2009, but it was that year where the Final Four was in Atlanta. I think there was like a tornado that went through. They had to push back the SEC tournament, and then they ended up knocking off Kentucky, winning the SEC tournament, and getting a bid into
It's crazy.
the national tournament. When I mean they were a sub 500 team all year, so and that's exciting. That's what I like about the region tournaments, the conference tournaments. There's that opportunity on the line where it's like in football, it's like, yeah, we love football, the 10-game season, but once you follow those region standings, you don't have that one last shot. But I actually saw it a couple years ago. I think when Coach Washington was brand new he might have been at Pebblebrook or South Cobb, but same sort of deal. They were like a 3-10 team heading into the region tournament. And then they end up getting a 3 seed and making the playoffs, a huge upset. So anything can happen. Test yourself with these regular season schedules, take your lumps, but show up at the right time.
Exactly. So that's what makes it so unique, man. But we'll obviously leave that there. That's our second segment. Third segment, we're going to bring on somebody, Casey, in just a moment. But yeah, we have a lot to talk about. Obviously, this will be NFL section, and then we'll wrap with some, obviously, some NBA, things like that. But yeah, man, so much to talk about. I guess we could talk about the matchups really quick and then kind of get an in-depth analysis from it from our guests. But yeah, let's talk about it. Obviously, we're going to make our Super Bowl picks now as well. But let's start off with matchups. I outlined some of them last week on our show. But Craig, I'll start with you. What just stands out to you from a matchup standpoint in this game? What do you think are going to be some key things to watch out for on Sunday?
I think the biggest thing, I want to see that toughness from the Chiefs defensive line again, Chris Jones. If you can have a guy win his matchup consistently, it changes everything. And you just look at, I mean, I don't want to bring it up, but I mean, last year's Super Bowl, what happened? You have one guy disrupted, dominating on the defensive line. We've seen that consistently. Grady Jarrett almost had that same sort of performance, but if you can have that guy that just disrupts for 4 quarters, that throws off everything. It makes it difficult. It gets the offense questioning, okay, can we really take this chance on second and 3, or do we have to do something that could potentially? It's like you aren't as you aren't as aggressive offensively when you have that question in your mind where, okay, we might not be able to completely handle them. I said that last week. Chris Jones looked like Kimbo Slice out there. He just went out there and beat people's ass. And then you look at Dunlap. He didn't really have that big of an impact because it was all going through Chris Jones. He was just handling his job, staying on the edge. I think got to disrupt the timing. You combine that with maybe press coverage in certain situations. It's all about timing defensively against this Philadelphia offense that last week, the week before, they are just big across the board. So I think they have the size advantage. But if you have a good presence up in the middle that can disrupt and then play aggressive on the outside, I think they can create some turnovers.
I agree. That's a good point. That's going to definitely be one to match up against. And I think the difference, if you look at almost every recent Super Bowl, like let's be honest, like it's been in the trenches, the offensive defensive line. When you guys lost to the Bucks, not to bring that up, but it was just their defensive line killed you guys'
They
offensive
looked
line,
outstanding in
right?
that game.
And then when we went, right, their defensive line kicked our offensive line's butt. Aaron Donald, obviously, had Von Miller. You had Leonard Floyd. And then if you go and look at the one when Philly won in 2017, kind of the same thing. Their defensive line was creating pressures and making it tough. Brady did do his thing still, but that was a key thing in the game. They were getting those stops, and then they were creating pressure, and then the fumble by Brandon Graham. So I think that's going to be a key thing in this game as well. I mean, obviously, Craig alluded to it on that side of the ball. Can Chris Jones, Willie Gay, Frank Clark make a difference against that really stout and probably one of the best offensive lines in the game right now? They have 3 All-Pros on the offense: Jason Kelsey, Lane Johnson, Landon Dickerson. So they got some studs. And then on the other side of the ball, Chiefs offensive line is pretty good as well. So can they create pressures against Mahomes with their front 4? That's how you're going to have to beat them. Front 4. You might can bring blitzes, but I think they're going to come in with a quick passing game, getting the ball in his hands quickly. Can Hassan Riddick have a game how he had in the past one against San Fran, making that big of an impact with the front 4? That's going to be crucial, I think, in this game. So that's another matchup to watch out for.
It's just crazy. I mean, we'll talk about the Chiefs offense in a sec, but Pacheco, the first NFL game he ever went to was the one he played in. How crazy is that? It's like you see the way he's been playing. That's what I like about this Chiefs offense. No one knows what they're going to do in this game. You really don't. I mean, you talk about the quick passes. They are so good at just drawing up these schemes and getting all their guys involved. Philly's just going to have to do their best to contain it. I mean, you know how it is defensively going up against the Chiefs. They're going to get
far too well.
Yeah, they're going to move the ball extremely well. They're going to be creative. But with Philly, it's just if they get that run game going, and then if their offensive line wins the battle, I mean, we're in serious trouble. But so that's why I think that's the biggest area to watch is can that Chiefs defense rise to the occasion and win that battle up front. But I've just been so impressed with the Chiefs defense. That's what everyone said. As long as the Chiefs have an average defense, they'll be good.
Right.
Well, they've stepped up more than average, and they have a secondary that I think is more than competent, as they've shown in recent weeks, just not only with the athletic playmaking, but the schemes. I think they are going to be aggressive in the secondary. It's just all going to depend if they can make it difficult to shut the run. But I'm watching these other playoff games. You saw when the Bengals played the Bills. The Bills were blowing coverages. Guys were wide open. I haven't seen that with the Chiefs. I mean, all these plays, I mean, when the other team is able to move the ball, they're contested. They're in the right spot. These guys know what they're doing. They got tons of rookies out there, but I think they've really just studied, worked together throughout the season to be prepared. I think that's just changing the game when you have that many rookies about to appear in the Super Bowl. I mean, it's a huge opportunity for guys coming into the league that can potentially make an impact, and Kansas City could become a place where they're just hoarding talent.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I think another area we didn't talk about was going to be the red zone. I think it's going to be key for Philly as well being able to stop Mahomes, obviously,
Yeah.
making them settle for 3 and settle for 7. That's what kept us in the game, obviously. A couple weeks ago when we played the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game was be able to get those stops consistently. Obviously, they started scoring, but we was able to make enough stops early in the game to keep our offense in the game, and then obviously later on score touchdowns to keep it close. But yeah, it's gonna be key, I think, too. The red zone. Who's gonna score touchdowns? Who's gonna be kicking field goals? That's gonna be another thing to obviously watch out for. But yeah, I think you brought up a great point. Everybody's talked about the Chiefs' defense. If they have even an average defense, they'll win championships and Super Bowls and things like that. But yeah, we've seen them step up. The rookies, Trent McDuffie, Cook. That whole secondary has been Justin Reed. The whole secondary has been great this season. So can they do it again? And you can't say, oh, well, they haven't faced a team with weapons offensively. They just faced the Bengals. They have probably one of the better passing games in the league right now, especially with their weapons with Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, and then Jamar Chase. So they're going to go against Devontae Smith now and A.J. Brown. So they faced that before. So, I think that's another key, as Craig mentioned. Can the defense do it again? Can they make those stops? Can they make it tough for them to win on the outside? Something to watch for.
Yeah, and got to give credit to the Eagles, all the just what they've been able to allow Jalen Hurts to do, the talent around him. He's just so comfortable out there. So, I mean, what do you expect from him in this game? He hasn't really gone over more than 25 passes. I think he is going to use his legs when he needs to. I mean, this is the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's all the marbles.
Yeah.
You have to. I mean, I think they need to just have their same game plan. I don't think they need to make him pass all that much. If he's around about 35 passes, I think in this game they'll be fine. Hurts shouldn't have more than 35 passes in this game. I don't think he shouldn't be over 40, 50. Like, no way. They have a good running game. They have good running backs. They have a good offensive line. So I think, like you said, just lean on the running attack a little bit early in the game. You get your offense going forward instead of backwards. Be balanced, which is the key thing, I think, against the Chiefs. If you're going to have a chance, kind of get them on their heels. If you're going to be Steve Spagnuolo, he has to be on his heels. He can't dictate and know what you're doing. If he will dictate the game with his pressures and the things he calls on defense. So I think for Hurts and the Philly offense, they're going to have to run the football, keep him about around 30, 35 passes, I think, in this game, and then let him use his legs when they can. They probably have a QB spy on him, but when he's able to run out the pocket, extend the play, hit his guys in stride. I think that's going to be the key.
Yeah. I just want to talk about Andy Reid for a second. So Mahomes, I think the first time he went to the AFC Championship, that was when we lost to the Patriots, never got the ball in overtime. That's obviously since changed with the rules, but an Eagles fan went up to me after the game and he was like, so typical with Andy Reid losing in the playoffs. And I was like, hey, thanks, man. I just think it's interesting, that aspect of this. I mean, he's been so fantastic and cutting edge with the Chiefs, the way they just built their roster. I think they have Mahomes locked down for all these years. That's going to look like a bargain several years from now when the rest of the league, I mean, he's not even a top 5 paid quarterback at this point with his contract. I think they're going to be able to be good for a long time. And I just think, man, another Super Bowl win for Andy Reid, I think would be one of the biggest storylines outside just the Chiefs' sustained success, just what he's been able to do and that resurgence in Kansas City when many people look at his career in Philadelphia as someone that just couldn't get the job done.
Yeah, let's talk about that actually. So it was tough for Philly because they made, you might not believe this, Craig, I think they made 4 straight or 5 straight championship games on the same side, but they could never get over the hump. They only did it one time, made the Super Bowl, lost to the Patriots. So definitely could feel the angst for Philly fans there. But yeah, I think, it'll be interesting to see, obviously, as you said, the storyline, if they do win, what it'll make of Reid, who is kind of inching towards kind of being one of the better coaches to ever coach the game. I think he's inching in that conversation. But what I've been seeing, I kind of want to get your point on it too, Craig, is they're kind of anointing Mahomes already with a win or a loss as a first ballot Hall of Famer. I want to know your thoughts on that, and then I'll respond.
Well, I'm obviously going to say yes. I love Mahomes.
Right.
But I think that's interesting. First ballot. That's tough. If he wins this game, though, I definitely see that. Definitely.
But you guys see the difference. He said if he wins the game, though.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
they're anointing him now already, win or loss. So
good distinction. Well,
yeah, and I think that's
win
what
or
you
loss.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far.
That's how I feel. Like I wouldn't go that far yet. He's phenomenal.
Yeah, I think if he wins it again, it's just like
Right.
if he wins it again, gets MVP and gets Super Bowl MVP, I think you could say that.
Right.
But
right
yeah, at this
now,
point, no, he's got to get it done.
I can't say that yet. I mean, there was no disrespect to Mahomes. He's phenomenal. But let's be honest. In Super Bowl, he has 2 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. Right. It's great. But let's see how he plays in this game. You know what I'm saying? It's like that's how I am. Like I need you to see you do. I need to see him do it one more time. You know, then it'd be like, okay,
100%
cool.
agree with that.
Yeah, I can't say that yet. I mean, only one Super Bowl, one MVP, possibly going to be 2. I can't quite just say that yet. I have to, you know what I'm saying, see it again from him. And then I can say, okay, yeah, he's a first ballot, but I can't say that yet. It's too early. Like you just said, he's 27.
Yeah,
I can't
it's
say
gonna
that.
be
Like we were
so
talking
nerve-wracking, though.
I can't say that yet. You know, but he's will he get there one day for sure? And I thought you brought up a great point too. Just his career so far, and how he's played is great. But it's just tough for me to, say that yet. And it, obviously, like you said, his contract's a bargain. And a key thing too, before we bring our guest on, the great quarterbacks that win 7, like Brady, like a Joe Montana, like it's going to be sacrificed, right? Like you can't go. You're going to be able to get your money, but it's going to have to be framed how the Chiefs did it, which I thought was magnificent. Like they framed it to where he gets paid higher on the back end, right?
Mhm.
So then everybody called him crazy, which I was one of them because I was like, that team's not going to be the same without Tyreek Hill. I mean, this team's going to look different. I was like, they bring all these guys in, there's no way, right? So obviously, I misrepresented how great he was, right? So I take my thing on that, right? But to be where they are, again, it shows how great he is. But it's the money thing. So it's being able to sacrifice, knowing, hey, I want to keep Kelsey, or hey, I want to keep this player around. So my favorite team, the Bengals, we're gonna have to go through the same thing right now. So obviously we want to stand Burrow, he's the franchise, but then at the same time we got to think, okay, is he gonna make the sacrifice that a Brady did, or possibly even a Mahomes, right? So that means if he gets all the money, then we're gonna have to do the same thing you guys did, right? We're gonna have to build young in our secondary. We're gonna have to build young on our defense, right? That leads you to more kind of susceptibility. That leads you more to, okay, I don't know, like in this spot how they're gonna play. So it's something to think about. But obviously these quarterbacks, like you've seen recently, the Kyler Murrays, you've seen the Aaron Rodgers, you've seen the Russell Wilsons getting $250 million. But then it's like the team after was not as good, because you think about it, you got to allocate your resources to the team as well.
100%. That's why it's so important whether the Chiefs can get it done or not. Other teams are looking at this model.
Yep.
But I think the Chiefs really did have an attitude with Tyreek where, I mean, he was obviously, I mean, it wasn't a question. As soon as he left, people were like, oh, man, the Chiefs, they just lost one of the most explosive, exciting playmakers in the league. This is going to be tough. But I really think they had an attitude of how can we not only go through this transition, but somehow find a way to get better. And I think what they did is just they looked at it as a place where you could bring in guys that had specific things they could bring to the table in the receiver role. And then you're almost like a launch point for them where they can come in for a year. Look at Kadarius Toney's contract, come in for a year.
Juju Smith-Schuster.
Yeah, exactly. Have a great season, and then you can go off elsewhere. You aren't contractually obligated to pay a superstar receiver for multiple years, and that's the only way to do it with this quarterback-driven contract situation. And other teams are going to be in the hole way more, and so that's why the model is so important. But it's also, as you said, a young secondary. That's huge.
I agree. We're going to leave it there. We're going to bring on our guests, so give us just a sec, guys.
But, man, I am nervous for this game.
You're nervous?
Miraculous play to Tyreek Hill, and it's never easy with the Chiefs. They always make it interesting.
All right, let's see if we can bring it on.
All right.
Hello, can you hear us?
Yeah. Are we on?
Yep,
we're here. We're on.
All right, Casey, so let's get started. Thanks for coming on. Let's talk about what I think is the most overlooked aspect of the Chiefs' run this season, just their rookie class. You were telling me just about their overall attitude heading into this season, knowing that they could potentially play a big role. So just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, first, and on behalf of Jalen Watson, who is pretty much asked the same thing, leading in he's to be in this role and knowing they can contribute this early on. And his response, what I thought was a pretty cool line, but like it's also very indicative of their mindset. They are absolutely almost more accurate to call them first round vets now. They coming in this season that this really, this is chapter 2 in Mahomes' career. Like planning on starting it this early, but with the whole Tyreek negotiations, it kind of forced me to start it, and they started it now. And I think they all knew, especially with such a large group coming in, that they really did have a chance. I think they've been making the most of their resources. They've been making some of these vets even better who weren't necessarily really big in leadership positions before. Like he's really taken on, especially to George Karlaftis. But honestly, like you can even see him walking along the sidelines talking to they're making the veterans better leaders. They apparently had one really rough practice. They didn't want to feel like that anymore, and so they started a study group. So there are 10 of them, 10 rookies / first round vets that will be playing in the Super Bowl. One of those actually is Jackson, undrafted linebacker. But of all of those 10 draft picks that we have, the only one who won't be actually playing in the Super Bowl, but he's been on the 53-man roster. He's just inactive for that one. They're going to be playing a really big role.
What were you saying about how coming to Kansas City, it's obviously middle America, but they're almost just consumed in this mission, just in the Chiefs organization, to just focus on football, focus on the season, no distractions, and just what is that?
I think that's a big part of why they. Yeah, I think that's a big part of camp in St. Joseph, because they're still close enough to home that they're not like, it's not like a thing, but they still get to like really focus when they're doing training camp, because they're all in this camp. But yeah, they're all, they were even saying during training camp that Brent Clark and George Karlaftis were the last two on the field. And he was, showing him all of his different, he's openly said that this is his favorite rookie class ever because they keep asking all these questions. And isn't necessarily his style before, but that being around all these other guys that were constantly asking him, it really like encouraged him to start doing the same thing. And so they're really of this situation. I mean, you look at Trey McDuffie probably had the most hype coming just because we did package 3 picks for him to move up from 29 to 21 in the first week against the Cardinals. And then like the Hydra, you cut off one head, 2 other ones come out. Joshua Williams from the 4th round and Jalen Watson from the 7th round having to participate early on. And he had the game. It was a 100-yard pick 6 against the Chargers in week 2. That was a massive win. And then you get to this past week against the Bengals, and both Williams and Watson. It's Watson, by the way, GHSU product Watson from Lane. He's had interceptions in back-to-back weeks now in the postseason. And coming back in halfway through the season, and in a way, he's almost playing catch-up to these guys that were drafted way later, hold down the fort in his absence.
So what about Watson, though? You said something about how he has a goal where if he's targeted 4 times, he wants an interception every 4 targets.
First of all, the Kansas City Chiefs put out the franchise on YouTube, but they had a sit-down interview with him after that game, after his first start in week 2, where he 4 targets, he needs to make a play on the ball. And he knew he was going to be tested. He knew that everyone would know the story on the round, that like all his others, that he was working Wendy's in Augusta, Georgia 3 years ago. He knew that because of all of this, he was going to be tested, but the more that he was tested, the more opportunities he would have to make a play on them. It only panned out that way, and he has really good vision, honestly. I think they're all like really like eager for the opportunity to prove themselves.
Talk a little bit about what you think the overall formula is that the Chiefs are doing that makes them kind of stand out from the rest of the league. It's obviously gotten them all the way to the Super Bowl again, but then how that could potentially change the way other franchises approach what they do with their rookies. I mean, look at how many draft picks the Chiefs have coming up, and just how are they going to be able to take in all these rookies, find ways to get them to contribute to make the team better, but then also just keep doing that year after year.
I think it's becoming pretty evident that Veach's formula going forward is getting the absolute contracts. I mean, we even brought in Lonnie Johnson Jr. We traded for him at the end of the offseason and then released him because honestly, Veach was happy with the cornerbacks that he got in the draft. We brought in Ronald Jones Jr. and he's also, I mean, he's not very happy with his role because he hasn't really promoted Isaiah Pacheco above him. So, I mean, and even Sky Moore, like it was still having him return these balls. Like it was kind of starting to feel a little bit mean because he had, I mean, through on that he fumbled or muffed, and they still kept pushing him, and he returns, including the largest one in the season from any Chiefs player in the AFC Championship game. Make sure that they can contribute early on instead of letting them like develop for a year or two behind veterans. Their process started really early, so it's not that we just find what we have right before we then have to decide to pay. We're trying to act like the fact that we didn't pay Charvarius Ward meant that the Chiefs were already in the mythical place, but whatever. But I mean, that was a $42 million contract served, and we got a lot of good usage out of him. But we already have like these young guys coming up that we don't need to be paying. We don't need to be paying $30 million for one offensive weapon when Mahomes can clearly turn anyone into that kind of flexibility too. In that, if you're getting all of this return, investing in the line, which is something that they've prioritized the past couple of years, and then maybe in strategically be really good leaders to these guys, you're also not really committing too hard to any one direction. I think it's always a good idea to make sure you're not just building your team around beating one. I think the Bills are kind of learning that lesson, and that, I mean, I don't think that the Chiefs, I think that they just happened to match up really, really, really well against the Chiefs. So I don't think that was them thinking that the Bills kind of did to that extent. But, when you build entirely around one team, then other teams. So
let me ask
the
this.
fact that we're not like committing too hard to any one direction, like the ability going forward.
Right. Let me ask this. Do you think do you think the Chiefs and the Bengals is a robbery in the NFL?
Oh, of course. Of course. I don't know. I'm not like a big trash talker out of hand, I think, going into the past week, or the past couple of weeks. Like, it's to remember that Twitter is not the real world either. So most people are generally reasonable. Things are getting, I don't know. It was getting a little crazy there for a minute, but it's definitely that both quarterbacks will be better in the long run for this rivalry. I think that you guys keep the Chiefs on their toes for a very, very long time, which is a good thing. But like, I also don't think you guys happen to match up really, really well against this. I don't think it was a deliberate choice to build that way to beat. That's why,
I agree.
Who knows what the Bills are going to do?
It's a good point.
Start rethinking everything. I don't know. It's kind of like when the Clippers were so focused on beating the Spurs, and they got Spurs that by the time they did, the Warriors and the Rockets were already like the more prominent.
That's such a good point. I mean, that's how I feel too about the Bills. I feel like they've all the years just been so focused on beating the Chiefs, and it's been Bills, Chiefs, and then when it came time, like you said, the other team kind of eclipsed them. Right, and then it was just basically Warriors, Rockets. Yeah, I think we're seeing that now. I think personally, I think they're going to regress a little bit. They have some free agents and things like that. Obviously, Josh Allen's a great talent, a great QB. But he reminds me more of like Ben Roethlisberger. He's just more athletic, and there's no disrespect to him in that way. He does phenomenal things, but I think he's the big. He makes those off-platform plays, but sometimes you can see him kind of get sloppy on some throws, turnover.
Yeah, he definitely had some turnover issues this year.
Yes, so I may be interested to see next year, but obviously, I think we know who's going to be top pretty much year in, year out, barring any major catastrophic injuries. I just want to let you know I was not one of them that was talking mess. I hated our mayor doing that. That was so stupid. Like we didn't need that. Like you don't need to be doing these public addresses about teams. It's just unnecessary. We don't need that energy.
It's so
I thought,
it's so
yeah,
dorky.
it is. We didn't need
I
that.
just
We
don't
didn't want
like
that.
speaking to.
Right. It
Like
was
I
just
don't know why
like,
they think that's gonna land.
yeah, it didn't. And it was like, and I even told Craig, like, I'm still nervous going into the game because I know what Mahomes can do. Despite us winning 3, which that is not really done in Mahomes' career, you got to still go in confident but not cocky. You know what I'm saying? And I thought it was just too much at one time. I think the Burrowhead comment, I mean, obviously that spurred some things, but I think that was just because of the disrespect that they constantly got all year long, calling them a fluke, saying it was going to be Chiefs Bills, selling those AFC Championship tickets
100%.
before the
Like,
game.
I
No,
I
go ahead.
understood their mind over the like go get your refunds comment. To me,
Right.
that wasn't fans or anything. That was more so a jab, I think, at the league and like all of
Yes.
all of the effort they pushed in that ended up not being necessary at all. Like I had no issue with them like taking that as a material point. Like that,
Right.
go ahead, like do that. Absolutely do that.
Agreed. Well, let's talk about the
fault
Super Bowl. Obviously, right. Obviously, the championship game. Regardless, I mean, people gonna talk about the officiating. I've let that go. So we'll leave that where that is. But I thought overall, it was a great game. I enjoyed playing you guys at the end. I thought you guys just made more plays. Your secondary was great in that game. I thought the pressure, Chris Jones took over the game. I thought it was just an incredible game, and I think going forward, like that's a game I told Craig even during the regular season. That's a game every year they need to schedule between both teams. It's just going to be great finishes every year. All 4 games decided by 3 points. Just incredible. But let's go to the Super Bowl, right? You guys are playing the Eagles.
Okay.
What stands out to you in that matchup? What are some things you're looking out for that you got your kind of eye on? It's the offensive line versus defensive line. It's the red zone. Is it Chris Jones? Is it Mahomes and the health of the ankle? Is it filling their run dominant team? Is it them getting deep with their weapons? What is kind of standing out to you in the Super Bowl?
But that's what's so exciting about this game is that I have no idea. Like I don't know where this is. I mean, that's what's kind of fun about AFC, NFC matchups in general is that you just, and I know that we played there's not even really much of a point in rewatching film from that game because they're both completely different teams at this. I mean, it really, I think will come down to how these rookies show up. Also, I think Nick Bolton and Willie Gay Jr. have at linebackers probably going to be pretty important. They have not been recently, and I think they need to step up. But I mean, I think we could see potential to pass the ball decently. Like honestly, I think Tripman option. He's been so close on like 4 or 5 plays recently where the ball is like just slipping out of his fingers, and I'd be due for one. Honestly, health. Ankle feels better now than it did at this point before the game 2 weeks ago. So going to be a little bit more mobile. I mean, he could run when he needed to do that much. Our offensive line is significantly better than they were again years ago, which I can't even talk about that game still. But I don't know. It depends. There's just so many guys who we'll see who. I think McCole Hardman's probably the only one that it seems really unlikely that he'll play. I know Legere is in protocol already, so he'll be able to practice this whole week with them in Arizona. And Tony already said he's definitely playing, but that came directly from him. So I don't know how much we can trust that, but I think for the most part, we'll be getting most of those guys back. I just hope we don't end up being like held together by duct tape by the end of the game for sure.
I hear you on that. And let's bring this point about X Craig. He said not yet. He thinks he needs to win in order to kind of anoint him as this. But a lot of talk has been in the media that already right now, regardless of a win or a loss, that Mahomes is the first ballot Hall of Famer. Just what's your comment? What's your take kind of on that? Do you think he's already in that convo now, regardless of a winner or loss in the Super Bowl, first ballot Hall of Famer.
I'm going to be extremely biased here. I would say at the very least, though, that this game doesn't necessarily make that loss. I don't know that. I mean, I don't think a loss hurts his legacy in this scenario. So I don't know that it factor other than him just getting back to this stage again. I mean, the third time in 4 years. It's pretty crazy. I really hate this question because it makes me start to think about like the day that he does retire, and that really makes me sad. He's only 27, but
right.
I mean, it's hard to know. Like, what comp would there even be for that? Like, if you were like to have
I don't
such
know.
a short resume.
That's exactly. That's how I felt. I think it's too early to say that. You know, like first ballot. I think it's more premature. He's phenomenal.
I
but
did
it's early
visit
to say that.
Pro Football Hall of Fame back. By the way, if you've not been, it's super cool. And I will say that Mahomes was all over the place in the section of it, so they definitely like him there.
I have a question specific to Andy Reid. So you can talk about how huge he's been just in the not GM role, but just vision for the roster, just influencing some of these decisions. But obviously, this is a huge matchup for him against the Eagles. You always say he's not always showing all his cards. That's what makes it so exciting to watch the Chiefs. You don't really know what to expect. Let's talk about him a little bit, what you've seen this season from him and what you expect on Sunday.
It's a very good question. You know, I love Andy Reid. I mean,
you have an Andy Reid tattoo.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's different.
About a dozen.
But she called her shot. She said if they win the Super Bowl, she's getting it. And they
won. Interesting. Okay. So
I also
playing up
said
on the
that
bet.
if they win it again, that I'm going to doodle a little Patrick Mahomes to like join on my.
Interesting.
Yeah, about 12 other people have that tattoo on the bank robber guy who was like robbing banks to fund his trips to the Chiefs games on him too. So it's probably in like some like gang tattoo database now because he's definitely. I mean, it's just there's a reason that these guys like love him so much. I mean, even did you guys see that moment with him and Frank Clark on the field after they won the game? Like Frank Clark said at the start, he sat me down last year and he told me like that, you know what you're capable of. I know what you're capable of. Like he started the season with taking accountability for that. And so to see him, like they were just hugging each other and being like, I love you. It was so cute. His guys love him so much because I think he really, his stuff them be like the players that they've always pictured themselves as. Like he really does cater very specific instead of trying to like make them fit his scheme at all. And so they really like they get to play the football, and he really does play to everybody's strengths. So I mean, I don't worry. Like he will be able to work some magic. He will be able to Travis's dad open, and I think that like as long as like we're not, then I think that like he will be able to play to everyone's strengths enough to keep us in the game, which is obviously able to do too.
Nice. And then plans for the Super Bowl. Obviously, Chiefs fans only. No Eagles fans.
Our Uncle Jerry's house, because his birthday is right around the Super Bowl every year. Day party and Super Bowl watch party. So we were there the year that we won, and that was right after to finally get to watch a Super Bowl with Jerry for the first time, and they won it. Repeat itself. I'm going to make a strawberry and orange cream pie with Chiefs colors. Delicious. I don't know. I'm just going to try not to panic too much beforehand.
And then last question, just throughout this season, obviously a lot of people thought it might be a rebuild year, but what was the game to you that stuck out where you're like, okay, they've got something special brewing once again. They figured out how to not only handle all the injuries and the turnover on the roster, but they've actually kind of redefined themselves or reinvented themselves.
It's really difficult to answer that question now that I've been watching and catching back up, because we went through each game and I'm like, holy crap, like how did we win that game? There were and like it really has just been like a week by week process with them. But like looking back on, like, we had a few games going overtime there that like I don't even like this whole season. It felt like it started like undergone so much growth, and like even just looking at the AFC champions exercise their demons in that game. Like they've already like made these. That's why it's it is maybe veterans at this point instead of just rookies, because they've already had like all of the issues and had to get past. They've grown so much. They've each of the rookies, honestly, like they're in that week 2 game against the Chargers with Jalen Watson's 100-yard pick six. Even the game against the 49ers, that was Isaiah Pacheco's first start, and like he showed up really big for that one. Joshua Williams had an interception in that game, and that was against. I mean, obviously they were just then trying to incorporate. That was still a pretty good 49ers team. That they really, I mean, the rookies looked really good against them, especially I think that was right before the bye week too. So that was a really nice note to end on.
I think that game was a big statement. The win over the 49ers.
Yeah, people did not like it's not the same team. It's not the same team. Like I know it's not the same team, but they were still a pretty decent team, and the Chiefs looked pretty dominant.
For sure. Well, I mean, thank you for the time. I mean, Najeh, do you have anything else? I just wanted to ask one more thing about the Eagles. One of the things I've heard is they haven't been tested yet. I think that's because they've beaten the crap out of everyone. So do you see them as like a real formidable opponent?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I mean, I absolutely respect the Eagles. You're not going to trick me into saying them. I have a healthy respect and fear of them. I'm sure that Mahomes will provide. We'll see how up to it they are. I don't think that like straight up have not played anyone decent and have not been tested. Like it'll be a different challenge, but they're still.
Yeah, big moment for sure. Najee, do you
my last question, we'll let you go. Obviously, is about like how important you think it is for quarterbacks, especially. We've seen recently quarterbacks getting paid a lot of money, right? The Kyler Murrays, the Aaron Rodgers, 3 years, $150 million. The Russell Wilsons and things like that. But we see the next year they're not as good. But what do you think about that? And how important do you think it is for quarterbacks that are coming up that are going to get massive contracts? Obviously, Lamar Jackson's one of them. Joe Burrow's another. Justin Herbert's going to be another. How important do you think it is for quarterbacks to, sacrifice some, maybe not take all of the money, but be able to leave some for, the GM and for obviously the people in the front office to kind of build a good team around them so they can contend for years to come?
It on players to like take pay cuts. Like I'm always rooting for players to like, make what they're worth. I think, the burden should be on front offices to then make that work from there. But obviously Mahomes by signing that deal. And I think that, it was so unprecedented, and not just in the amount of money of the contract. And I think that is, that's one of the biggest things. The fact that it's like get him a new contract until 2032, I think. Like that's just, it's not even just the money. It's the fact that it's the size of the table for a decade. They will always be on the same side of the table. And he can always, Mahomes leverage in the fact that like he can restructure his contract whenever he wants to make room for play specifically. So it does give him a little bit of power in it. So I think it's not just the way also, that it was structured to kick in more on the back end of the contract too. Like there's just so much more so with how the contract is set up than necessarily just the amount. And guys wanting guaranteed money. I really do. And I don't want to ever say that anyone like should have to take a pay cut. Like they need to be better at their jobs too. And especially as much wiggle room as if you look, I think that Veach is setting a really good example for how people should be proceeding salary cap, especially with it going up too over the next 2 years. Like he's working his magic in the next couple of years too.
For sure.
Yeah, and I think, it's the changing of the guard. We've seen it. Tom Brady's retiring. So that'd be interesting if like this next generation, if other big time stars, Joe Burrow included, sign into these really long term contracts. I think that sets up for what we want to see, which is just annual battles with the best and being able to have teams that can be built around
like,
them.
where they're drafted. It's just better.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. All right, well, go Chiefs.
Yeah, good luck Sunday.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Casey.
Yeah, I mean,
All right.
before we transition, Craig, to our other stuff, I wanted to ask you that. Could you foresee Burrow going for? It just dawned on me when we were having that discussion. Could you see Burrow going for maybe a 10? Because he said he wants to be a Bengal basically for life. You see him going for, Bengals doing something they never done. They always get clowned as a poverty franchise, not putting their best players first. But could you see him signing like a 10-year plus deal with them potentially?
I think Joe Burrow wants to win.
Right.
I think he's going to put winning at the priority. He knows how good he is. He knows how big of a star he is, but they're going to pay him. But I think he's 100% willing to look at the big picture, look at the long term, and say, yeah, we're obviously focusing on winning next year, but it's to him, I think it is about a career, a place, building a team that's going to be competitive year after year. Because if you don't have that, you can have these frustrating seasons, and then you're almost wasting some of the years of
Your prime.
career. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think he'd 100% be open to it, and I think he's a quarterback that, like Mahomes, puts the team first and wants to win.
We're going to see.
It's just,
It's going to be good offseason.
Because you might have a guy that gets paid more per year, but that's only a 4-year deal, and you might run into a situation where the team falls apart, they miss out on the playoffs. But if he's making maybe a little bit less one year and then more the next, but he's comfortable in a place that's building year after year, I think that's something that would definitely benefit him. And as I said, winning is definitely first with that guy.
Yeah, we're going to see, man. That sustained longevity is going to be key. So we'll see how the offseason plays out. Obviously, they're going to have big players. They got to pay. T. Higgins, everybody's conjuring up this drama about us trading him. We're not trading T. Higgins. I don't know what's wrong with y'all. We're not trading him to the Bears for the 1 overall pick. Like, y'all need to stop, okay? We're not doing that. So it's the reasons why Bengals did some of the things they did in offseason, building an indoor practice facility, changing the name and rights to the stadium to pay Corey instead of Paul Brown. They're doing these things to set up these contracts. So we'll see how it goes. Obviously, the owner wants him around. Joe Burrow wants to be around. And other players do too. So we'll see how it all pays out. It's going to be interesting. We got a lot of free agents this year, but we'll see how everything works out. But let's talk about one more NFL topic, a guy that Craig actually played with at the University of Georgia. He was a stud there. I don't know why everybody thought that he wasn't as good as he was, and talking about him as basically being a lanky receiver. I mean, I just tell you from my perspective, when we drafted him, I was like, yo, we just got a dude. We just got a guy. And I knew that off rip. And what disappointed me was who we got in the second round. No offense to him. He did play the career with us, led to 5 straight playoff appearances in Andy Dalton. But you just know who's the guy and who's not. And, he was always good, but he just could never get us over the hump. But we appreciate what Dalton did for the Bengals, obviously. But, I mean, I just remember watching him. I mean, every game, this guy just made a play. Every game. And it sucked that he got injured and things like that. But just talk about from you and your personal stories, what you got from him and how cool it was to play with him at University of Georgia.
Yeah, so I got there 1 year before he did. And obviously, he came in big-time superstar, saw his highlights from high school. And really, at that time, it was A.J. Green and Julio Jones. It was A and B at that point. I think if you look at their overall careers, like Julio had great seasons, but really it's AJ Green. He did it every year too. Top 5 receiver in the league pretty much every season. Had a really long career. If you look at what he did in college and professional, I mean, it's unbelievable. And he was just a quiet guy, always about his business. And you mentioned it. I just think it was so funny before the draft. When he went in there, people were like, oh, he needs to add size to his frame. AJ Green was working out with the linebackers and fullbacks. He was one of the strongest guys on the team. He squatted over 500 pounds, benched 375, even with that length. He was the only guy besides Tavares King that ever outran me in the 40. He always outjumped me in the vertical. He was top, one of the most athletic, strong guys on the team. So I just every time. It's like with Julio, everyone's like, "Oh, this guy's a beast." AJ Green was pretty much just as strong and physically gifted. So I just thought that was crazy. And then he ends up in Cincinnati. They have some tough seasons, but still, I mean, an absolute superstar, great guy, and I think he's just set himself up really well after his career. He lives in the Roswell area now. He's got a great house. I saw him at the park. Geno Atkins lives down here, so a lot of his NFL teammates are around here. I'm just excited to see what this next step is going to be for him.
Yeah, for sure. All the Georgia guys that went there live in the Roswell area and things like that. But yeah, it'll be interesting what he does in the next part of his career. Obviously, retiring a
Maybe
little
he'll
bit.
take up golf. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I could see him being
Probably
a golfer.
good at that too.
Yeah,
He was good at everything.
I wouldn't
He
be
could have played
surprised.
college basketball.
Yep. But yeah, he was only 34, so retires early. Still has a long, career ahead of him and things what he wants to do in life. And shout out to him. And like I said, I'm always the Bengals fan appreciative of what he did. Obviously now it'll be the Hall of Fame thing if most people say no. But he was just a great athlete for us, a great receiver. I hated that we could never win with him. He was such a stud. So that 2015 loss was heartbreaking. That kind of took our toll on our franchise. I thought we never got back to the mountaintop after that. Basically rebuild era after that loss against Pittsburgh. But I always remember him for those catches he made and those big plays. And, we're forever appreciative of what he meant. I think he's made the argument he's number one in franchise history in a pretty illustrious receiver bracket that we have in Cincinnati. I mean, we've had Chad Johnson, Terrell Owens. We've had Tyler Boyd now, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. We have Mohamed Sanu. We have Marvin Jones. We had some really good receivers that's come through our franchise, Carl Pickens. So for him to be up there, I think says a lot. And we definitely appreciate what he meant to our organization.
100% Bengals legend, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And then obviously, real quick, our Super Bowl picks. I'm going with Philly. I think it's going to be a good game. I think it's going to be tight. I think it's going to come down to the running game. I think it's going to come down to Philly can get pressure. That's going to be key in this game. Obviously, we'll see how it all shapes out and pans out, but that's going to be keeping my eye on for the Super Bowl. And if they can get pressure on Mahomes, can their secondary win? Are they going to play more man in zone? And then can they play ball control and keep Mahomes off the field? But I think it's going to be a good game, tight knit. But I'm going to roll with Philly.
I'm going 27-23 Chiefs. I like my 4-point Chiefs predictions. So we'll see.
You surely do. You surely do. But all right, we're gonna leave football there. We got a couple more topics, and we're gonna wrap the show for today. Let's talk Kyrie Irving. He recently traded to the Mavericks. He requested a trade earlier in the week to the Brooklyn Nets. Apparently, I heard there's a stipulation in his contract that he had to win a title, I think by his third year or something like that, in order to get his money. It's like I think guaranteed or the money in this contract was a stipulation in there. So what do you think about that, Craig? And then what do you think about the trade with him and the Mavericks? Or to the Mavericks?
I thought it was very interesting news to see him request it right before the trade deadline.
Me too.
Obviously, it's been not the smoothest ride with Brooklyn from both ends. It's like when you see just like a bad relationship or marriage where it's not going well for either side. You can't really be surprised when it doesn't work out and they eventually cut ties.
Right.
But I thought the big question was, where is he going to go?
Back with LeBron, he might go here. I think Dallas is actually a good fit. I mean, he can just finish out the season there. He's going to have Luka. People are saying how well will they play together, but he's good in isolation. The Mavs run isolation. I think he'll be able to come in and play at a high level immediately. So I don't think Kyrie is as big of an issue as some people do. And people want to say, oh, well, the Nets were better without him. The Nets won games without KD too. It's like they never hit their full potential, the Nets. That's obvious. But in this new role, to sit here and say Kyrie Irving's cancer, first of all, who are you? It's like, imagine me criticizing any professional basketball player's ability. It's like, I'm not a professional basketball player. Right. I'm not going to do it. Imagine me criticizing any NFL player. I'm not an NFL player. So it's like, I think the reaction to it, you don't sit here and say, oh, the Mavs are the favorites now. You just wait and see what's going to happen. We all know it didn't work out in Brooklyn. Is really interesting for him to request it at this point, probably right before the All-Star break. But I think it's exciting. I think it makes the NBA more interesting, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely the West. And the West is really up for grabs right now. I mean, obviously you have the Nuggets at 1 seed and then Memphis 2, but the Kings are 3. I mean, they haven't
watch out for Memphis.
Right. They haven't made a postseason in a long time. So we have to see how it all plays out. But, for me, I think, the test will be they're both ball dominant guards, right? Obviously, Kyrie can play off the ball, but is Luka, willing to sacrifice a little bit to have that better help? That's going to be the question because he's very ball dominant. He likes to control the shot clock all the way down to a couple seconds before he makes his move and things like that. So can he sacrifice, maybe doing a little bit more ball movement? But as Craig alluded to too, we have to wait and see. We don't know what's going to, happen from it. Well, my thoughts is, it sucks. Obviously for the Nets, I think you can at this point say it was not a good decision for KD to leave Golden State to go to Brooklyn and team up with Kyrie. I mean, they only have one playoff series victory, in that tenure. And to go to State and end up winning another title. So I think that's pretty set and dry at that point. And he's older now. He's 35. What I will say for Brooklyn is they got some good depth pieces, obviously, with Spencer Dinwiddie, and then they got Dorian Finney-Smith. And the guy, Cam Thomas, lately has been playing really good. That could be a building block piece for them. He scored 40-plus in his last 2 games. Only other person to do that is LeBron James, who is on pace to beat the record, I think, tonight or in a couple of nights to beat the all-time scoring record. So I think that's a building block for them. But will KD still be interested is a question. Ben Simmons, a lot of question marks around him, saying he doesn't have really any trade value. So we'll see what happens with KD. I mean, that'll be intriguing to see. But I guess, Kyrie, he did what he thought was best for him. He didn't get along with the owner. I mean, Coach, you guys could say he had a tumultuous time there with Brooklyn. I mean, warrantly so. But it's just tough. It didn't work out. We'll see how it work out in Dallas. Obviously, Mark Cuban makes a big move. We'll see if they can contend for a title.
Yeah, it will be interesting for sure. As I said, though, I think the trade just makes it more intriguing. I want to see what it looks like, too. I know one thing, you can't team Luka anymore.
No, you're going to get killed.
And so it could be very beneficial, or it could take some time and not work out well. But there is potential for it to be a good landing spot for him. I don't know if he had that as his preferred destination,
Lakers.
But yeah, I don't think he can be too mad about it. He's out, fresh start, finish, and just go out there and ball.
Yeah, that's it. So we'll see what Kyrie does after the offseason. Obviously, he's going to be a free agent. So we'll see if he's able to sign with the Lakers. Obviously, Lakers are trying to make moves now, potentially even trade Russell Westbrook and get a couple pieces. But, I mean, the one I seen today with Malik Beasley and obviously Michael Conley, I don't think that's worth it if you're trying to get pieces. I think they need more front court potentially, and maybe, another guard piece, if anything. I think Michael Conley's a little too old. At least Westbrook, you still have the athleticism there, kind of the will and fight to play. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. Obviously, as the season goes on, but that's our thoughts on Irving. And NBA is obviously looking really interesting right now, and we'll see if KD gets traded. They're linking KD actually to Boston potentially.
Yeah, it won't be the last move for sure. Yeah. But I mean, back to Dallas, they're a great defensive team, but still, talk about Luka and Kyrie. That could be interesting. Kyrie's got a great ability to score. He's got a good 3-point shot, one of the best dribblers in the league. I think it's exciting, and I don't think Luka is the type of player that is gonna, like, Kyrie's presence is gonna completely throw him off. I think he's good enough to handle it.
It's a good point. We're gonna find out, but we're gonna leave that there for today, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed our show. We're gonna see you guys in the next one next Tuesday at noon. We'll be back for another episode of Underrated Overlook Podcast. Tune into Craig's show tomorrow. He will be back on for the Georgia drive for the state title. Yes. I always mess that up. But tune into the show tomorrow. He'll have some lovely guests on his show. I'll be back Thursday for my show. I'm trying to have some guests on. And then obviously Friday for Craig's show. So we'll see you guys soon. We appreciate you tuning in. And catch you guys next time.
Have a good one.